Eric Crawford, welcome to the Players Perspective Uncensored podcast. My man, how's everything going?
Everything's good, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, man.
You.
Good to see you, man.
Haven't done a Zoom in a little bit, so it's good to actually see you guys.
Yeah, We're joined by my co-host, Alhaji Muhammad. Man, it's good to have you guys on, man.
And it's good to be here, man.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
As we start off with all our guests, Eric, we always start off asking our guests, do you have a favorite bourbon, or what's a bourbon that you like to get into when you just casually having a social cocktail, being a bourbon drinker? Tell us a little bit about a bourbon that you like or that you prefer.
I kind of go from one to the other, but I got to say I drink probably more Woodford Reserve than anything else, and I don't usually get off it, especially if I'm just gonna, drink it on rocks or whatever straight. That's what it is almost 90% of the time now.
Yeah,
in fact, I got one unopened around here somewhere. So
that's a good go-to, man. I'm a Woodford Reserve. I like the double oak version of it, man. It's probably one of my top go-tos. That's probably the one I was introduced to that really kind of got me into bourbon.
Yeah, that's right. It's the first one a lot of us get, and then you go through a lot of other stuff. You come back, like, man, that's good. So that's where I am. Makers. I few months at a time, I might switch for whatever I got, whatever's given to me sometimes. But Woodford is the most often.
Right. So give us a little background about yourself, E. How long have you been a sports journalist?
Oh, gosh, I've been a sports journalist since 1992. I was finishing up at Uofl, and I needed a job, and I really kind of resisted journalism. My dad was in journalism for 30 years, wrote for the Courier-Journal, worked for WHS television, just writing human interest stories. And I thought I would want to do something else, but I needed a job, and I just went to the Courier-Journal and got a job answering phones. I was taking like the bowling scores and stuff, and we still put all that in the paper. I mean, and I have done everything. I delivered papers when I was a little kid. I delivered the Louisville Times and my, when we lived in Fern Creek, and so, I started there, and I was getting a few high school games to cover from there, and a college game or some Louisville Redbirds or whatever at the time. Spent a little bit of time there, and then in '92, I got to go to Evansville, Indiana, to work for an afternoon paper that's now gone. There are no afternoon papers left, but that was my first full-time newspaper job, and went there and covered high school sports and Division II basketball at University of Southern Indiana, and rose from kind of the ranks there until that paper went out of business, and went to work for the morning paper in Evansville, became a sports editor there, and then I came back here. Got a chance to come back here and cover Uofl in 2000, 2001. That was Denny Crum's last season. Mm-hmm. And it was very, that was journalism education all by itself. And, from there, I covered Uofl for 5 or 6 years and became a columnist, started writing opinion pieces. And 2012, Rick Bozich and I came to WDRB television, kind of looked at the newspaper business and didn't feel too secure. So we decided to come and do television, and that's been a good move for us. That's where I've been for 9 years now, 9 plus, getting ready to hit 10 next year.
Nice. So obviously right now we're in the heart of March Madness. It's one of the best times of year, especially for college basketball. Who do you think has been surprisingly good? Who's been surprisingly bad? Obviously, we see St. Peter's has been one of the big stories of March Madness, but just overall in the tournament, who's been some of the teams that surprised you, both good and bad?
Well, I think like everybody, I'm surprised by how the SEC has exited the stage. I think, we watched those teams all year. I thought Auburn was a good team. I thought Kentucky was pretty solid. I didn't see, at Tennessee, same way. I thought these were good, solid, physically talented teams that are well coached, that didn't play a gimmicky style. They rebounded well. They played good defense, but it just didn't materialize in the tournament. You got to ask yourself, what did we not look at it the right way, which is always possible, or it's just the rest of the country, better? Is it more even? I think one thing I think's happened with basketball. I think you've got all these guys transferring in. You've got a new team for everybody every year. It used to just be Kentucky and a couple other programs. Now everybody's new every year. Yeah. And you can build a good team, but it may not be as consistent as a team as if you had guys there for 4 years. I mean, that's the tough thing. And I think, just bringing in new guys, you might get a bad game here and there. And because of that lack of consistency, you're able to throw in a clunker every 5 or 6 games. And of course, you got to win 6 to win the tournament. So I've been surprised at that. I've actually been surprised that Duke's gone on is still around. I kind of wondered. I thought Michigan State might get them. I thought they looked like they were done. They were maybe wilting under the pressure of all this Krzyzewski hype.
Right.
So I didn't have a whole lot of faith in them. I thought Gonzaga would do well, and they have. I'd hope Murray State would do well. I don't think that was a very fair draw for Murray State and St. Peter's, but who knew St. Peter's was going to do what they've done? They've been fun to watch, and they're legit. That wasn't a fluke victory over Kentucky. It wasn't like they did something Kentucky just didn't play. They beat them. They beat them straight up.
Yes, they did.
And they expected to beat them straight up. They're extremely well coached. They're very disciplined. They're extremely tough. And you're going to see that all levels of basketball. If you've got your mind right in this time of year and you execute and make some shots, you're going to do some really good things. So I think, that's been surprising. Nobody, there's only one region that went according to seed. And to me, that's going to be one of the most fun regions to watch because you got Gonzaga going up against Arkansas and Texas Tech against Duke. All those are going to be fun games. And then the region that we thought we'd be at, WDRB, covering Kentucky, where you got, St. Peter's there and Purdue, and maybe this is the year they get to a Final Four. What happens over there? So I think it's a very interesting tournament. I'm trying to think of who else we got in these other regions that's a particular big surprise. I don't think it's a huge number of just, wow, they're still here. I think the big thing is the SEC just kind of hemorrhaging teams. The Big Ten still has some around, but they haven't done great. I think what they should do is in that first 4, just make that all SEC and Big Ten every year and let some knock each other out and get done with it and get on with the tournament.
Right. I think the parity in college basketball is great. I mean, like you said, you have a ton of kids in the transfer portal now, and a lot of the kids are mid-major kids. And so now, you have the high majors that are taking these mid-major kids. And so essentially you got, a bunch of young kids on the high majors with a bunch of other mid-major older kids that are playing against other mid-major schools. So in essence, you're playing mid-major versus mid-major. And like you said, I think you have to go with schools that have teams that have been playing together for a while. Like Mark Few has a great system, time in and year out, he gets guys to buy in and to play into his system. And so I think when you look at it, you look at the Gonzaga versus Memphis game. Prime example, I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, this is a prime example of talent versus experience. I said, now, if you go from top to bottom, Memphis is probably the more talented team. I said, but when you want to talk about experience, outplaying talent, so you go with Gonzaga. And I think that was just a prime example. And I thought, Memphis had a chance, but just, Gonzaga warmed down. Gonzaga played with, furious pace. No matter what score was, they played with the same pace. Drew Timme, All-American, possibly player of the year in college basketball. He took over the second half, but, just the poise and the not to panic and, constantly taking good shots, playing good defense, playing consistently. Then you look at Memphis, young guys get excited up and down, depending on shots going in and out. You start to take, shot selection starts to get a little bit tough, moments get a little bit too big. You're not sure yourself. And so I think all of those things played into a factor. And I just thought that was just a prime example in a microcosm about, college parity and talking about experience versus, talent.
Yeah, you're right. And of course, Gonzaga has a lot of talent too, which, not just experience isn't enough, but they got enough talent. And yeah, I thought that was a big game for them because that to me was their big threat game in getting to a Final Four. They were going to have to go all out to beat Memphis, and they did. These young teams, it's funny, and I don't think this is Kentucky so much, but they showed a tendency this year is if they're not playing a brand name, they're not quite all there. It's just not in their mentality that I'm going to have to, St. Peter's has got some guys that can play. There's that. And you mentioned something else interesting. I mean, a lot of times we take a mid-major kid and we put a Louisville uniform shirt on him or we put a Kentucky shirt on him and it's a whole different story, but he's the same player that he was.
Right.
He just gets a little more notoriety. Now, some of those guys were were already good enough to play at Louisville, Kentucky at those schools, but a
Yeah.
lot of them, probably most of them weren't. So you just have to you get lucky on some because they're just, they're at a mid-major maybe because they developed slow, or they were small and grew, or a lot of things happen with players, that, and a lot of reasons they develop. So some just didn't get the chance, but a lot of times I don't know what percentage I'd put on it, but the mid-major guy, when he comes to Louisville, he's going to be good, but he's not going to be the kind of guy that's going to carry the ACC championship. He can help you win one maybe, but he's not going to take you to one. You got to get those guys usually at the higher level of recruiting at the high school ranks, or a big time D1 transfer from another Power 5 program usually.
Yeah. So who you got cutting down the nets at the end of the year? Give me a favorite and give me a potential dark horse that may be sliding under the radar, but has the potential to cut down the nets.
My favorite was Gonzaga. I picked Gonzaga from the start. Of course, I also had Tennessee and Auburn in the Final Four, so that's half my Final Four.
I had Tennessee and Kentucky in the Final Four.
Half of mine is gone. I only call them an underdog. They're not really an underdog because they've been a top 5 to 7 team all year, but they haven't been to a Final Four since 1980. I think Purdue, I don't love them defensively. They don't have maybe the up top to bottom athleticism some of these other teams have, but they got pieces everywhere. They got a big time lottery NBA talent. They got good size. They got depth inside. I think Purdue is probably a team that not a lot of people give a chance to. I think they got a chance to win it all because I think, they can beat Gonzaga. Probably think if Gonzaga's got an off night, but I think Gonzaga's going to get through, and that's who I like to win it all.
Yeah. Nice. When Coach Mack resigned, what was your initial thoughts?
Well, I was, I had been getting. We got to go back to when he was suspended, and I had some people that I was talking to that kept telling me, "You better watch something with Mack because something's going on." And they at the time really thought there was a real potential that he'd be fired. And I didn't, you get that stuff all the time. You hear that stuff all the time. And, you take it with a grain of salt because that's such a wild story. And then a few days before, they're like, no, it's serious. It's really coming down to it. Tyree's throwing himself in front of the speeding train to try and save Mack. And the president wants him gone for various reasons. And, it wasn't a good situation. And so when they came out with the suspension and 6 games is what I thought it would be, and it was, that was a huge message to Chris Mack and everybody else that they weren't happy because there's guys done a lot of other stuff that didn't get 6-game suspensions. That's a really big thing especially in the regular season. Right. So I think he saw the writing on the wall then. I'm shocked though that it came about the way it did. I mean, I thought we'd seen everything here at Louisville, and then we get, the athletic director kind of playing some poker with them at Uofl, and may go to Florida State, might not. I'm going to let him go. I'm going to resign so I can take this job at Florida State. All the while having no idea that he had a pair of twos, and Neely Bendapudi was holding a flush and was about to play it and be gone. and she was right. Out of there, and the board of trustees, they had a chance to take Tyree back and didn't. And the whole group is gone overnight. And you're like, what in the world is going on? I thought at that point, Mack might survive all of this just because the president who didn't like him was gone. Now the AD that hired him was gone. So that's never a good thing. So I just kind of wonder what was going on. But on the court, something just wasn't right. Those players weren't connecting with their coach. Something wasn't right. And Mack, I'm surprised he left midseason. I didn't really like that move, but when you look back, it's certainly was what's best for the program at this point. If he was not able to connect with players and get them to respond, it's probably the best thing for everybody. But it was a bad thing, a hard thing to look at during the course of the season. So I wasn't surprised that something happened, but I was very surprised how it happened and when it happened. I thought that was just one of the more surprising things we've seen here, and we've seen a few.
Right. We've seen just about everything under the sun.
Just the way it happened. That was crazy.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've seen a coach resign, that close to the end of the season. Obviously, things weren't going as everybody expected or as everybody had planned. But I think the body language just on the sideline just kind of said a lot. I think the pressure, the writing, the player, the disconnect. I think you get, seniors, 6-year seniors like Malik, making comments in the media talking about, I'm not sure if I'm disconnected or if I'm even listening to if we're even listening to the coach. And so I think all of this plays into effect, man. I just think it just took a toll. And, I would have liked to have seen him finish it out regardless. I'm always a person that, you start something, you finish it, good or bad. I think you finish it out. And I don't think you quit or give up on the kids. I think you take it, for what it is. You protect, those kids by any means, regardless. That's what you get paid to do. So I would have liked to have seen them that, but, it didn't work out that way. But
part of me wonders, and Josh Hurd's never said this to me. There may be a time when he tells us this story and we're able to kind of talk about it more and know more what happened. But I think maybe he saw the opportunity that was in front of him, when Mack may have cracked the door open and said things weren't going well or something, and they did have a meeting, and he said, "Well, what do we do about this?" And kind of said something like that. And Mack wasn't closed to the idea of going. I think it's highly possible that Josh Hurd kind of pushed this into motion a little bit too, and just said, "Look, you're sitting." And I think Mack knew also, and I do believe this. He knew they were going to have grounds to fire him after this NCAA stuff came out, just because of the way his contract was written, the Division II or a Level 2 violation, which is not a big violation, in the grand scheme of things, but just against the backdrop of his contract, that administration that doesn't like him, they've got a reason to fire him. Maybe he takes the money now, and it'll be more than he can get later. A lot of factors played into it, but whatever the case, I think Josh Hurd sat back during football season and sat back maybe in watching Vince Tyre hire a football coach and seeing Jeff Brom nearly get hired and then not. I think he maybe saw a chance to go after his guy, and a guy everybody wanted that felt like could have been a game-changing hire, and just kind of rolled the dice and got the job open, and then tried to see where he could go with it.
So now that the university has moved on and they brought in and hired Kenny Payne, much sought after from the alumni community, many people wanted to see as the head coach for the university. What has that done for the university and for the city of Louisville, just bringing him in and making him the official head coach?
Well, I think you saw, simply in the 2 days he spent in Louisville, just the outpouring. It was an emotional couple of days for a lot of guys. A lot of guys in this program, a lot of guys who felt forgotten for a long time, to be honest with you. A lot of players that wondered if, they knew that they still come out every 5 years and get honored on the anniversary of the championships, but haven't seen Louisville players, maybe supported, they felt like, by the university the way others have at other schools. They saw a lot of recognition, and it may not have been them up there getting hired, but it was one of them. And it was a big deal, because they are, you start to talk about, and we talk about what it means to Louisville and what it means to the city and the university. Gentleman, I did a Boy Scout thing today, a fundraiser for Boy Scouts. A gentleman that's running for mayor comes up to me and says, "I read where you wrote that Louisville's going to hire a new president sometime in the future. They're going to elect a new mayor this year, and they're going to hire a new basketball coach. And the basketball coach is probably the most visible of the three, and arguably just as important as the other two, if not more." And he said, "And you weren't wrong." So that tells you something when a mayoral candidate says that. It's a very influential position. And what I'm hoping it does, and what I feel like he's hoping it does, and a lot of people hope it does, is to bring just this multitude of voices of guys, and they're in all walks of life. They coach, they have all different kinds of jobs in business, they're judges, they're whatever. Their voices, I think, the community needs. And I think having Kenny a little bit of a megaphone up there as a coach kind of brings them out to the forefront a little bit. And maybe that is, it's certainly something that the community hasn't really availed itself of in a long time. And now it has with Kenny, and maybe that's something that he's able to facilitate here. Beyond that, what it does for Louisville, I think it gets you players, and I think that's the key to the whole thing. Because if you don't win, if you don't have players, if that's not churning through the city and creating a buzz and excitement, it's hard to get any other kind of message out. But I think he can do that. I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind that he's got the kind of relationships that you have to build to bring in, talented coaches, talented players, and to build a base of high caliber basketball pretty quickly.
Nice. First objective as the head coach of UofL.
First objective, I know he's got a bunch. I think he went back to New York for a little bit to kind of think through his next steps. He's got to come up with a staff. I think that's your first step, because you don't want to try and tackle any of this stuff by yourself. I think you're going to find that where he's able, he's contacting families that he knows, recruits that he knows, people like that he knows, but he's also doing a lot of research. And one thing I've seen about him, this whole search, I mean, as much as it was Louisville, exploring options, which they had to do, I think, for a multitude of reasons, and putting out feelers for various coaches. I also think it was about Kenny talking to a lot of people, and there's a dozen people that said, yeah, I had a 2-hour conversation with Kenny, all through the course of this, whether it was Wade Houston or whoever, that were voices in his ear. He was questioning them about the program, about the job, about what needed to be done. I think he's a very meticulous guy as far as that goes. He doesn't do anything rashly. He doesn't do anything quickly. If anybody was looking for him to, come in and name a staff in the first 3 days or whatever, that's not going to happen. But I think you will see that what he does is well thought out, that he has a philosophy behind it. He's had a lot of years to think about what he would do if he's the head coach, and now he is one. But I think, to me, the first, really, the two priorities that you have, he's going to be talking to these players as soon as they're back from spring break, and he's going to be talking to prospective assistant coaches. And I think he's been talking to prospective assistant coaches already, getting ready for this.
Any ideas of who you think he'll hire as assistant coaches?
Well, the big name that, this isn't original with me, but it's the name you hear is Nolan Smith, who, has ties here, is been at Duke a long time, is probably ready to move into that next chair as a head coach, is a good young coach, has had success recruiting. He's been there at the highest levels of Duke University. Of course, he's still involved in the NCAA tournament right now, but he was just here. Duke played here. He had another chance to kind of touch base with Louisville up at the ACC tournament in Brooklyn. So all of that's happened there. I think I'd be shocked if there hadn't been conversations. And I think you'll see Kenny also reach out, to look for a guy that has been around and is more seasoned, and who that will be, I don't know. You look at guys he's worked with maybe at Kentucky, or guys who have been around this program for a long time. So I don't know. There's a lot of other names to go with, but I thought his, when they asked him what he was looking for in an assistant coach, I thought that was one of the more poignant answers he gave, is that there's a lot of talented guys, but if you don't care about these players, I can't use you. So that's going to be how he moves forward. And I think that had to be something that perked the players' ears up and got everybody's attention. So who's that going to be? I'm not sure. I don't think you can just pick out a guy and say, well, this guy'd be a good X and O guy to help a guy that hasn't been a head coach. I don't know about that. And I'm not that hung up on a guy that hadn't been a head coach. I mean, one of the guys that Kenny talked to in the course of taking this job was Jeff Walls. Had a couple of long conversations with him before being hired as coach. And, Jeff told him, as he told me, he said, I hadn't called a timeout either when I got here. It's just, you just got to get the right people around you. And Jeff's done all right. He's going after his fourth Final Four. If he can get there.
Done more than all right.
So, you don't have to have done this a long time, especially if you coach with some of the people he's coached with.
Yeah, I've heard Nolan Smith as well, but I've also heard, a couple of NBA players, even one of our locals, Rajon Rondo is possibly, with the staff. So, that would be, I think that would be kind of awesome. Honestly,
that would be, that would be,
if he wants to retire, man, just being a friend, I know he definitely wants to get into coaching. It's just speculation, just rumor, but just hearing that name, I haven't talked to him about it or anything, but man, you couldn't have a better name, better recognition, a better recruiting tool. And just, talking about a guy that, probably born to be a coach with his IQ and his ability to, knowledge of the game, man, I think that would also be a great potential as well. But just, just something that I've heard, I've heard Nolan, I've heard Rajon as well. But I've heard a few other guys too, but just the Rajon one, I hadn't, it kind of caught me off guard, and I'm like, man, but that would be a great, being from the city, that would be a great hire.
Oh,
For
it'd be
the
fantastic. Yeah, for him to wind up back at Louisville.
Yeah.
that
Yeah, I was around when Rick was recruiting Rajon, and Rajon was ready to come to Louisville, and Rick wanted Sebastian Telfair, and he shut the door,
That's
and
that's
and
a
it
whole
didn't get
nother
opened
story,
back up.
oh yeah, that's
And that whole thing led to, it's pretty amazing. I mean, Rajon winds up in Kentucky, and Telfair never comes, and Patino has to go get a point guard, winds up getting Andre McGee.
Yeah.
It changes history sometimes, but Rajon as an individual, for Louisville to have him involved in their program at the university, it would have been a fantastic thing all those years ago, and it would be a fantastic thing today if that happened.
I agree. And so Kenny's been around some great coaches. Obviously he started with Ernie Kent out at Oregon. He's been with Cal for a few years. He's been with Coach Thibodeau, great defensive mind, with the Knicks. So he has a great mixture of coaches to really pick from to create his own style. What do you think his style would be if you just had to guess? Obviously, nobody knows, but if you just had to guess, I heard him speak a little bit about wanting to play fast in his press conference, but what do you think his style of play would be?
I think if he gets the type of players he wants to get, and I feel like he will, and he talked a lot about conditioning and about being fanatical about conditioning and making sure you're the best conditioned team, that they would become a type of team that could, at least, if they're not a full court pressing team, they'd be a half court trapping team, and they pick you up and make you waste a lot of time before you ever get into your offense. And that's, when you can do that, I think it's a big advantage in college basketball for teams that don't necessarily operate the best in the world when the clock starts getting down to 6-7 seconds till the shot clock goes off. And so I think I think if you go back to his playing days, I always said it, Louisville was the fastest, highest jumping, most athletic, hardest playing team that you were going to come against, and people did not enjoy playing against them. If he could say that about his teams, I think he would be happy. What it looks like, I mean, everybody goes back, is he going to run Denny Crum's old offense? Is he going to do that? I don't know. It's just, you really got to get players and see what they do. And we see this at Kentucky, where you get the best players you can get, and then you figure out how they can play the best. And I think that's what, if Kenny's smart, he's not going to lock himself in and say, I'm going to play we're going to be man-to-man and nothing else. We're going to be this. There's a lot of ways to win. I think the big thing, though, is that he's going to get players that are able to execute whatever it is he wants them to do, and he's going to figure out what they do best.
What does Louisville need to do with finding a school president and athletic director?
Well, that president's process, I guess, has already started. They put out what they call a request for proposals. So that means that they'll get a search firm involved, and it'll be very secretive, like Ben DePutty's was with Penn State. We're not going to hear a lot about it. We didn't know who Neely Ben DePutty was till she showed up on campus to get introduced. So that, that's a process that, students will have some input in, but then they'll have community meetings, but we're not going to know anything about any of that till it happens. And it's probably not going to happen for a year. I mean, that's just how long that takes. The athletic director is more interesting. I think they're going to do a search for an athletic director. I think they feel like they owe it to themselves to go out and look to see who's interested and to see who's out there. I think Josh Hurd has done himself a lot of good by being able to kind of land this Kenny Payne plane. That was the big deal, and that's a credit to him. So that's going to go into his account as a credit. Whether that means he's going to get the job though or not, I don't know. I still say he's got a 50% chance, and the field has a 50% chance, because they're going to talk to some guys and they're going to see who's out there and see who's interested. And I don't know who that is right now, but I don't think they wanted to start that process while they're trying to hire a basketball coach. There was a time element to basketball coach. You couldn't let that go to next fall. It had to be done now and be done the right way. And they didn't want him to be hired while they're interviewing guys to potentially replace him. So now that Kenny's hired, I expect we'll see a little bit of a process, but I think Josh Hurd upped his stock. It got a little bit tougher to take away from him with the hiring of Kenny Payne. I think if Kenny likes him and can work with him, I think if all the coaches like him and can work with him, that's probably going to go a long way. So I think I'd say he's a lot more likely to get the job today than I probably would have said a month ago. But I do think they're going to look around.
Nice. Name, image, and likeness. What do you think that it'll do for student athletes, and what effect do you think that it'll have on recruiting for the University of Louisville?
Oh, I think it's going to change everything. But we all kind of said, well, here it is. That August 1st date came last year. And we're like, this changes things forever. And it did, but didn't change them overnight. I mean, it did, people don't just spend money for no reason. Companies don't just spend money for no reason. They need to know that it's worth it. They need to think about how they're doing it, figure out, who they're going to spend it on and how. And so I think we've seen it slowly ramp up at Louisville. I think it was a factor in Malik Cunningham coming back as quarterback. I think you're probably seeing it in Louisville football recruiting a little more. I think it was definitely, if you talk about Kenny Payne and his decision on whether to take the job here, I think it involved him polling guys who have money, who are boosters, who have companies in the area. And, are you going to support us or not support us? And I think that was a part of him, becoming the coach here, getting the right assurances that people were going to support it. So I think you're going to see it be a factor for players here. And, it's a factor for some other athletes. We see there's women's players at U of L that have it. There's football players at U of L have it at lower level. But the interesting thing is that a lot of it that's out there is not reported. So we don't always know who's getting what. And we probably won't know who's getting what. It's not entirely the business of everybody to know who's getting what.
Right.
But guys are getting money, and they're getting, they're getting places to live. They're getting cars. They're getting money. It's all under the rules. And, the sport hadn't come crashing down. March Madness is still going on. We're still talking about it and having a good time with it. So it has changed things. It will help the University of Louisville. And people forget what Louisville's like when everything is going. They forget what it was like in 2013. They forget what it was like when they're about to go to a Final Four, or when the football team's going to a big bowl game, or Lamar's pushing for a Heisman Trophy. When that stuff's going on, Louisville's a pretty powerful force against you, because there's no NBA team here, there's no pro franchise here. The money, the corporate dollars, they're all available for the university. So I do think it's a game changer. I just don't think it was the instant, fast game changer. People aren't going to pour money into a program that they can't be sure about the future of, that they're worried about, negative news coming down the pike and being associated. All that doesn't happen. But I think that it's coming back for football, and I think it'll be in a big way for basketball very soon.
Nice. Now, E, we've reached a part of the podcast we call our Burr-proof segment of rapid fire questions. Gonna shoot you a few. Don't give it a lot of thought. Just give us your first answer, and we're gonna roll with it.
All right. Okay.
Most intimidating coach you ever had to interview?
Bob Knight, no question, without question. He was not only rough, he was tall, he was physically imposing. He was even intimidating on the phone. And I covered him for a few years when I worked in Indiana. Calvert Cheney was his big star, and I was with the newspaper in Calvert's hometown. So that was fun. It was fun. He gave you great answers, but he was tough.
Favorite U of L sports moment?
U of L sports moment. The championship in 2013 was hard to beat, because there was a lot that went into that team. That for all of the stuff that's come down since, that was a team of underdogs to a large degree. There were not a lot of high caliber, like blue chip guys. Those guys worked for that championship. Russ Smith worked, Gorgie Jang worked. Rick Pitino, he gave Gorgie Jang 10 English words a week, and Gorgie had to come back and tell him the meaning of them. He virtually taught him English. So it was like, it was those guys, to see them come together and win a championship, that was pretty remarkable. That championship to me is the most memorable.
Nice. Favorite athlete you ever interviewed?
Oh gosh, now you're getting what I say, Larry O'Bannon, maybe something like that.
My man.
How about
That's
that?
what I'm talking about.
Favorite athlete to interview? Gosh, it changes over time. One of my first big interviews after I became a reporter was with a baseball player. I had gone to Cincinnati to cover a Major League Baseball game, to cover a pitcher for the San Diego Padres named Andy Bennis, who's from Evansville, Indiana. I was going to do a story on him, and he wasn't there. He was getting treatment and working out for the game. So another guy, player, yells at me across the locker room, asks me who I'm looking for. I tell him, he's like, he's not here. He'll be back. You can sit over here if you want to. And he was watching video of himself batting. It was Tony Gwynn. And he had a little TV and a little VCS player in the locker. And he talked to me for about 20 or 25 minutes. And Tony Gwynn, was the greatest hitter in baseball for a very long time, Hall of Famer, just 3,000 hits. That he would sit and talk to me. I was just starting out. I've never forgotten that. And that is one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done. It was pretty remarkable. UL's had a lot of great ones come through. Francisco Garcia was always fun. He was, no matter what happened in that game, no matter who had a big scoring game, Francisco was like, I talked to him before the game. I knew he was going to do it. I've been talking to him all day. And I would put that in stories. And then some of the guys would say, look, he talks to everybody before every game. He texts everybody. So no matter who has a big game, he's going to say, yeah, I was texting him. I told him he was going to have a big game. So he was a lot of fun. It's been a lot of good guys. And I'm hoping, we haven't talked to Kenny about this, but once COVID is all done, we can maybe get back in the locker room for a Louisville game and start having, just actual conversations instead of some of the press conference stuff we've had. Because that was one of the things that made it special. You got to actually talk to guys. And that, that helped. I think it gives players, you talk about NIL, that gives them opportunities to be in there a little more often, to talk more, and hopefully they'll get that chance.
Boneless wings or bone in?
I'm bone in. I don't mind the bone, man. I don't need a boneless. That's processed. I'm old school on the wings. You can leave the bone in. That's all right. I can deal with it.
Last question. On a good day, how many 3-pointers does Eric Crawford make from the top of the key out of 10?
Top of the key was not my spot even when I was in high school shooter, and I could make more. Out of 10 right now from the top of the key, I'm going to say 3 to 4, maybe. You put me on a wing, and I was better on the wing. I used to be a real good corner shooter, but I kind of lost that. Now on the wing, I might 4 or 5, but I bet 3 at most on the top of the key. Just not I don't know. Something about it's not my spot.
Eric Crawford, appreciate you coming through and blessing us with your presence, man, on the podcast, my brother.
All right, man. Good to see both of you guys. Thank you for
having me.
Appreciate it.
All right. Appreciate it, E.
All right, guys. Thank